To the Governance and Audit Committee meeting of Monday, the 4th of October. Please note that today's meeting will be recorded. This recording may be broadcast on the authority's internet, and it may be used for training purposes by the Democratic Services Department. All attendees will be in view of the camera, and by attending you are consulted to being filmed, and the possible use of these images and sound recordings being used as outlined above. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies from Councillor Darren Roberts, Councillor Julian Amos, Councillor John Thomas and Mr Robert Williams, our lay member.
Right, thank you. Otherwise, I think we're all present then. Item 2, any declarations of interest, taking into account A and B. No one's indicated that they have any declarations of interest. We'll therefore go on to item 3, and that's the Corporate Risk Register Highlight Report, and that's to consider the report of the Chief Executive, pages 3 to 18.
I'll take that, Chair, if that's okay.
Okay.
So it's the Corporate Risk Register Highlight Report. It captures the authority's perceived high-level risk information plus the mitigating factors in dealing with those risks. From a governance perspective, corporate management team meet regularly to discuss the continued risks along with the joint meetings with the Cabinet and continued scrutiny from this Governance and Audit Committee to form a consensus in relation to the risks to the authority. You'll see in Appendix 1A the risks that could impact on our ability to achieve our wellbeing objectives, 1 to 10, with dual risks at 1 in relation to short and long-term financial risk, approved at Cabinet 29th of January 2020, and at 5, capacity is split into general capacity to retain staff and 2, the capacity to deliver our statutory requirements. So our risks are identified in Appendix 1 are finance, 1, the in-year budget, finance, 2, the longer-term financial sustainability, 2, reputation, 3 is cyber attack, 4, school attainment, 5 is capacity 1, losing staff with skills and experience, and capacity 2, general capacity to deliver performance. 6 is compliance, the risk the authority cannot meet its regulations in law and statutory obligations. 7, what used to be Brexit is now EU transition Brexit. Safeguarding at 8, performance at 9, and COVID-19 at 10. And now there's a homelessness issue that we'll discuss a little later. The report provides information, Chair, as of the 21st of September 2021, so it's a point in time, covering additional information from 2022, and at Appendix 1B, you'll see our position as at September 2020 in graphical form. We also present the most recent position as at September 2021 at Appendix 1C. Appendix 2 has explanations of the system of risks within the report. You'll see from following the review of Corporate Risk Register by Cabinet and CMT on the 11th of August and the 16th of August, no risks were increased in scoring from April 21 to September 21. So consequently, the end of quarter 2, all risk scores remain the same. Risk scores that have reduced from September 20 as shown in Appendix 1A. Finance, which is the ability to balance the budget, has gone from red with a score of 15, which is critical, to amber with a score of 10, which is high. The other finance 2, the longer term financial sustainability, has gone from black with a score of 20, which is catastrophic, to red 15, which is critical. Reputation has moved from black 20 with a score of 20, which is catastrophic, to red with a score of 15, which is critical. And 7, the EU transition, Brexit, has reduced from red, critical, with a score of 16, to amber, which is high, with a score of 9. Homelessness has now been identified as the new risk shown in your papers, a 4.6 and a 4.16, with a description of the risk and mitigating factors at 4.17, and a score of 5 in terms of impact, and a score of 4 in terms of likelihood, placing homelessness alongside cyber attack, performance, COVID-19 as catastrophic risks to the authority. We've got several officers here today, Chair, for any explanations of the workings of the risk register. Steve and myself for finance, Lisa's here from housing, I think, to go with Chris and homelessness, and I see Ellis has joined us now for any rationale behind any of the decisions on the risk register there. Just remains the recommendations, Chair. 2.1, Governance and Audit Committee note and debate the content of this report and recommend its progress to Cabinet for approval. 2.2, Governance and Audit Committee notes the continued progress made in considering the risk management requirements of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015 and the socio-economic duty. And 2.3, Governance and Audit Committee notes the proposals to continue to present highlight reports on the corporate risk register to Cabinet. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Andrew. I've got one hand up, and that's Councillor David Chaplin. Questions?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On page 6, and Councillor Barry mentioned it, that no risk scores had increased during the period up to September 2022, but it says the capacity risk score decreased due to investments in posts and the governance risk. Bear in mind that the last general and audit on the provisional accounts, the council saved £681,000 due to the corporate vacancy factor, so a lot of jobs have gone unfilled. It appears a lot of jobs have been racked and stacked and to save money. And on the council's website, we've been doing exercises, and there are 26 posts that we're looking to fill, which will take time to fill. Are we sure that we can claim that and this idea the risk score hasn't decreased is valid? Because obviously, with such a high vacancy factor and so many jobs to fill, I can't see that statement is true.
Thank you, Councillor Chaplin. Who's going to answer that? Yourself, Andrew?
Yeah, I'll pick it up. I mean, it's a conversation we've had, Councillor Chaplin, in terms of the vacancy risk factors. There's two elements to it, isn't it? The vacancy risk factor looks good on the finances because we get money back, but obviously there's a risk element to it in terms of the vacancies that are highlighted within it. I don't know whether, Ellis, you want to come in and talk about the vacancy factor a little bit, or even Steve, because I've had the conversation there, whether you want to elaborate on the I suppose Councillor Chaplin's question is it valid that we have so many on the vacancy factor when we're saying that we're dealing with capacity on the other hand by creating extra roles, I suppose, Councillor Chaplin, yeah?
Yeah, both you've got such a high vacancy factor, and you've identified the need for all these other posts, both added together, then you're claiming that the score has decreased. It is counterintuitive to me.
Steve, you had your hand up. You're going to answer?
Yeah, a couple of things from me, Clive, thank you, is that I think from the outset really is to basically say that the corporate vacancy factor, we are not holding posts vacant just to save money. So it's not, it's not part of a strategy or something like that really to keep posts vacant for just a lengthy time. What happens is because when just somebody leaves us and that post becomes vacant, it can then take a specific amount of time for us to get that post filled. When you look at advertising the post, then you got interviews, then the appointee will have to give notice as well. So it can take a lengthy time really, and just for us to fill the post. So from the point of view of the capacity exercise then linked with the vacancy factor, they are very much two just separate issues. Because with the capacity exercise, we're looking to fill those gaps where we feel that we do have a risk in our services. Whereas the vacancy factor is just that natural timeline. It's before a post becomes vacant, and that post then being filled. So
I understand
I just hope that helps.
Councillor Chaplin?
If you've got a vacancy and it's unfilled, it's putting more pressure on the existing staff. We've identified for the capacity exercise that we need more staff. I'm just concerned that we're then saying, you know, that the situation's improving.
Ellis, do you want to come in?
Natural thing, though. Sorry, if I can just add.
Oh, sorry.
It is a natural thing, really, for staff and for staff to leave us. You know, it's not something which we welcome, obviously, but it is a natural thing that does happen. And so, really, from the point of view of the capacity exercise, I do feel they are really two just separate exercises.
Councillor Chaplin, did you want to come back in before I bring Ellis in?
Not on that, but I have got another question after that.
Okay. Ellis?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just to follow on from what Steve was saying, really. Yes, obviously we've got the natural attrition rate within the authority anyway, which you know, there is a time lag to fill in posts, which obviously contributes to the vacancy factor. But the reason we reflected on the position on the capacity exercise, as you recall, Councillor Chaplin, we were targeting, or we were looking at the capacity one under the lens of meeting our statutory requirements, and because obviously we've bolstered some of those areas which we felt were weak. We felt that it would have a material effect on the risk of the organisation. So I agree with you. It's still of concern, but the fact that we put in some key posts then to actually make those statutory services or strengthen those statutory services and our ability to meet them, we thought that had corporately reduced the risk. And obviously, with the capacity exercise 2 coming into council this week, obviously it is giving us a different context of addressing our risks within the organisation. So it's not a picture I'm totally comfortable. You know, I agree with that. But we do think, given the context of where we were, that was the reasoning and the logic for us reducing the risk.
Yeah, I agree. Once those posts are filled, yes, we will be in a better position.
Can I just query something? I've made inquiries as to what the situation is with the authority. This is some weeks ago now, in relation to the Heritage and Conservation Officer post under Neighbourhood Services. And later on in the other report, it lists there that we've got 223 listed buildings to deal with throughout the county borough. Now, having made some inquiries, I became aware that this post it's out to adverts. No, I think the advert is probably closed, but the post had been vacant. I verified that within planning for approximately 12 months or more. So I understand what Steve Jones has just said and explained the situation, but it doesn't seem to apply with every particular post in the authority.
To be honest, I'd have to check in terms of why there was a lag in terms of being able to appoint that post. Obviously, some specific posts we do struggle to recruit to. Sometimes there is a lag and a lead time, but I'm 99.9% sure that post has been filled this week. Right. But I can try and find out as to why there was such a period where it wasn't filled for you, but I don't have that.
Yeah, I mean, I accept that perhaps the situation with the global pandemic, and particularly what we've been dealing with here, may have something to do with it. But I made inquiries, asked the officers what was the situation. I had an answer, and then lo and behold, the post was advertised not long after I made the inquiry. So I understand what Steve has said, but if a post for all sorts of reasons is not recruited to in a timely manner, clearly there's savings made in the allocated budget. Councillor Chaplin, you got another question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My second and final question is on what Councillor Barry mentioned. There are 6 items in the catastrophic range: finance, reputation, cyber attack, etc. These are obviously the ones with the highest score. Do they appear on the Cabinet Forward Work Programme? Because I've not seen one since Councillor Salmon sent me the one in was about June, July time, and that only went up to September. These are so high. Do they feature on there?
Who's going to answer that?
In its various guises. I mean, we pick them up not so much in terms of the risk management, although that's a continual sort of issue for us in specifically looking at risk. But we pick them up in their various portfolios, and they're dealt with on a regular basis. For example, finance is picked up on a very regular basis through the budget board. There's no stone left unturned, as it were, on finance, where we look at monitoring reports on a monthly basis. In terms of school attainment, there are many conversations going on about how that can be addressed. Individually, they are dealt with, but not necessarily as a group of issues. But the priority is just reflected in the risk report, in the priority that we give them in their individual portfolios.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. Is there an up-to-date Cabinet Forward Work Programme? Because I've not seen one for months.
Yeah, I think one's been finalised now. I'll find out where we are with that, Councillor Chaplin. I'll get you the most up-to-date copy.
Thank you very much. That's my final question.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Turvey.
Yes, I was just going to ask about the homelessness risk. What's the position with that at the moment? What have the Welsh Government decided?
Chair, should I would suggest Suzanne probably comes in and gives a quick update on that.
Yeah, is Suzanne there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good.
I was going to say which Susie wants to do it. Go on, Suze, I'll start, and if I miss anything, jump in. Okay, so by way of a very brief background, so in May 2020, Welsh Government made some legislative changes to remove the priority need order from the Housing Wales Act. So anyone who presents as homeless would need to be accommodated to protect them from the spread of COVID-19. So this, coupled with the wider socio-economic factors really that the outbreak brought with it, has provided a very clear backdrop for a considerable increase in homelessness presentations. So year on year, we've seen increases, but for 2020-21, they were up 78% based on the previous year. So we saw about 750 just over in 2019-20, up to 1,345 in 2020-21. So with this duty, there's been a significant increase in the amount of people placed in temporary accommodation, given that we have a single person's need and a lack of single person's accommodation across the borough. So as of today, we probably have around 147 people in temporary accommodation across Merthyr. That's within B&Bs, supported accommodations like our hostels and young person supported provisions and Housing First. So this is really over 3 times what we would see in a normal year. On top of these sort of challenges, we have had the Welsh Government Hardship Fund made available to local authorities, which has a commitment until March the 31st, 2022. So we have the funding to be able to provide this. However, the risk factor for us, one, very much is ongoing financial stability in terms of being able to meet these costs. And 2 would be the risk of any B&Bs. We don't have sort of contracts in place with the B&Bs. We're using them on a rolling sort of 6-month basis, that the B&Bs sort of cease to provide the services for our homeless clientele. So in mitigating these risks, we've always had a social housing grant programme where we try and increase the numbers of affordable housing that we provide annually. The budget has trebled from about 1.2, 1.3 million to 4.4, which we've committed for the next sort of 3 years in significant affordable housing, including single persons. And we're accessing a range of land release fund, capital funds to try and access as many funds to not only increase the permanent single persons accommodation, but increase the broad spectrum of accommodation to meet the presented needs. So those with complex needs wouldn't be able to go straight into a house. They would need some level of supported accommodation or wraparound support with them as well. So that's sort of what's been happening and what's going on at the moment. We are in the background sort of preparing a wider presentation on all of the work and all of the developments that are happening to brief members, and we'll put that in the cabinet briefing plan as well going forward.
Oh, thanks. So it is quite a risk for us, really, isn't it? Without, well, thanks for that.
Could I just pursue that item? Because when this happened, all of a sudden, every authority had to really, bring themselves up by the bootstraps, so to speak, to deal with this huge issue. And the Welsh Government, because of the COVID situation, allocated monies to every local authority. Now, am I right in saying that the number of homeless under the Acts has reduced from the figures that were originally given to us a while ago? From last year, we were given figures which had really gone through the roof. So that's the one question. Have the numbers reduced of what you were dealing with? And number two, and it has been touched upon, and that's the financing of this problem. And my understanding was that the Welsh Government had allocated money, but I got in the back of my mind that this money was due to be reviewed round about now, this month. So perhaps you can clarify where we are with financing this City Week, because you still got COVID with us. So the problem is still with us.
Yes, of course, Councillor. So in terms of the first question around homelessness numbers and reduction, despite the number of, I think there's 147 people across our accommodations as of today, that number has fluctuated. So we have seen a lot of positive move on. So we've had single persons accommodation, we've had additional units, we've had successful people going into university, people going back home with family. So there have been some success stories. Unfortunately, as I mentioned previously, some of the other factors around COVID and the hardship that people have found themselves in throughout the pandemic, those numbers continually increase. So as fast as they go down a few, they come back up. So they stay in pretty static, despite some of the success stories that we're seeing. In terms of the financing of the problem, so the Welsh Government Hardship Fund was in place and guaranteed up until the 1st of October, essentially. That was reviewed, and the commitment has now been extended until the end of March 2022 on the same guise. So all of those placed under the newly formed legislation under the COVID responsibility, as opposed to the prior priority needs sort of framework, is covered until the 31st of March. We are working internally on some projections around what the bill would be for the local authority, and based on where we're at now and some of the projections, we'd be looking at about just over £2 million of a bill next year in additional costs that we wouldn't have seen this year. Obviously, the work that we're trying to do in terms of increasing the range of accommodation to get people into more permanent and secure tenancies prior to that is ongoing. And up until next September, we should have another 74 properties become available across Merthyr in a range of affordable provision. However, the risk is still very real that come the 1st of April, if the funding doesn't if the funding ends in its entirety, the local authority will be picking up that bill, as there's currently no messages from Welsh Government that there's going to be a reverting in or change to the current legislation or the current guidance. And the no one left out policy through Welsh Government very much pushes the removal of priority need to continue. As I mentioned, we are lobbying, and we hope that Welsh Government would provide some sort of transitional arrangements, maybe a transitional few years, to support us in getting to the place that we need, so that our capital grants to help us create more homes, but that's going to take time, and the remediation of land and the land that we live in around Merthyr, you know, has a lot of issues that we need to remediate first as well. So there's lots of things happening, but you know, yes, the risk financially as the 1st of April at the moment, there's no guarantees post that time.
Before I bring Steve in, it's good to hear that funding has been extended until the 31st of March next year, because this is a massive problem which all 22 authorities in Wales are trying to deal with. Ours is huge. When you look at larger authorities at Cardiff, Swansea, Newport, you know, as you quite rightly say, Suzanne, this is not a matter that can be dealt with overnight. So it's important to know from the Welsh Government what the situation is going to be in advance of the next financial year. I'm glad to hear there's lobbying taking place, because the real fact is what we're facing now, come out of this pandemic, is as a direct result of the Welsh Government altering the Housing Act. So it's, from what I can see of it, it's going to be a problem for every local authority in Wales for quite some time to come. Steve.
Yeah, I think it's all been just said, really, Chair. I think in respect of the hardship fund is ceasing at the end of March, but obviously we are lobbying, and we've made our concerns known that some sort of funding needs then, and to continue into next, just into next year.
Okay. Thank you. Can I query something, but perhaps I should be well versed in? But if you look in the covering reports where you relate to the number of corporate risks, where the risks have increased, I'm totting them up on page 8, that it's got number of corporate risks where the risk has increased to number of corporate risks where the risk scores have remained the same. That's 10, and there's one new corporate risk, but it says in the bottom that total 10, and then when you go to back to the first one on page 6 is 10. The one I've just mentioned, the total up on page 8, is 13. And then when you look at page 10, the total is 12. Am I missing something? Are all the totals correct?
Chair, if I'm right in looking at the same paperwork as yourself here, I think we've got the 11 main risks, which are the ones that's within the report, and then we've got the finance, which is split into 2, and the capacity, which is split into 2.
Right.
But they come under the one risk.
Ah, right. Okay. I know it does mention it in one part of it that they've broken up the financial situation into 2 separate halves. Right. Okay. That explains it for me.
Councillor Barry queried that with me this morning when I had the conversation with him as well. We're making it much simpler in the next report, broken it down even further.
Okay. Right. When we then go to the actual risks themselves. Two things. Reputation, because the reputation risk, I would suggest that sometimes perhaps not easy to assess all the time, because it's a moving feast. But clearly, reputation has to be there as a risk. I mean, currently we've got two issues regard to reputation. One is the school site for the new Roman Catholic school, and the other one is currently what we're dealing with this city status. So how do officers and cabinet members try and deal with that particular one? Anybody going to suggest an answer?
It's a difficult one, Chair, isn't it? You're absolutely right. You know, reputation can change on a sixpence. I think the two you've highlighted there are well chosen examples. Social media is an indicator, obviously. I think sometimes too much of an indicator, and we should step away from that.
Yeah, yeah.
It is. You know, we shouldn't put too much store in there. I think consultation is another one as well. Is obviously a mitigating factor, but it's a difficult one to rationalise because we never get the numbers for some reason in our consultation. So it's difficult to engage where we stand when you know you're not getting a representation that is out there. For example, the school fields that you mentioned, we came back first of all, I think it was about 375 people were on the consultation. Now, in terms of reputation, that did us a lot of damage. And I think we just need to look at ourselves in terms of how we gauge that. We can only gauge on what we've got, can't we? And we do gauge a lot by social media, and we gauge a lot by our consultations. But I think both of those, we need to have a long, hard look at how we treat those and how we gauge our reputation. The other way of doing it is councillors are meeting with the public all of the time, and perhaps there needs to be a little bit more engagement with councillors in terms of the wider cohort, the 33, to see what they believe our reputation is at any one time. So there's a number of areas we can go, but I don't think we've got the finished article by no means at the moment.
Okay. And one other, I need to ask the question, although we are dealing with the risks up to now, but item 7 on there is Brexit, which I know has now been changed. The wording's been changed. From here on in, currently at the moment, we've got, and that's still with us in certain parts of the country, is the fuel crisis, the enormous escalating daily costs of energy, and the sustainability of drivers everywhere. And the local authorities are no difference, because we need these drivers as well. So with those particular issues, is that all being dealt with? I marked it under number 7, but I presume that's what it would be.
Chair, if I may assist, obviously and it's the same for the reputation. Obviously, we have these meetings where we assess the risk position, and obviously then life happens and the news comes on and tells you what's going on. So the only stance we can take really is obviously a watching brief continually on these risk assessments. At the time that we took the judgment, we did feel that that was a fair reflection in terms of what we were facing from a corporate perspective. Albeit, the issues you mentioned there, there's a number of contributing factors, not just the EU exit, particularly the gas price hike. That there's a number of factors there. So all we can convey and commend to Audit and Governance Committee is that we continually review these positions as we go, and as we get material change in the risk position, you know, that's nothing to say. We say, well, okay, you know, next month we need to review this position and review this stance. So it's a matter in time of a moment in time. Similarly, for the reputational risk, obviously we took that stance prior to the city status discussion, and obviously it's always an evolving position. But I do welcome Councillor Barry's suggestion in terms of engaging with councillors' viewpoint, really, in terms of that would maybe give us a better litmus test in terms of public opinion at that time, and that's a good suggestion.
Thank you, Ellis. Andrew?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We were at red, so we were critical with EU transition. We reduced it to amber, which is a high risk. We had back in 2020 an update by Grant Thornton about our exposure to EU transition. It's a massively complex issue, isn't it? You know, and it's. I think we much as with reputation, we have to take as many views on how EU transition is affecting us as possible, both from the dashboard that was presented by Grant Thornton, by Ellis Talks to the News, probably the best way of us keeping up to speed on what's happening and how it's affecting us. It's not catastrophic at the moment, you know. I think it's right, perhaps where it is a high priority. It does affect everybody. I think where we are with EU transition is, you know, we knew that the transition was not going to be easy. You know, we knew there were going to be things that came up and things that we wouldn't even, you know, have thought of. It is right to keep it, you know, on the risk register as a high priority. Whether it goes back to critical is up for discussion, I suppose, in terms of, you know, the fuel issues that we're getting, the lack of perhaps drivers, the lack of care staff is another area which is causing us major concern. But those could be quite easily put into capacity as well. You know, there are other reasons perhaps why we're not getting those drivers. So it's difficult to see where it all sits, but it's a very difficult one to call because it's such a huge issue on a global scale, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you. Did you want to come back in, Ellis?
No, well, yeah, I will if you want. Sorry, Chair. At the time that we had the Grant Thornton report, if you recall, from an All Wales perspective, the Emergency Command and Control Wales, or the ECCW, was spun up from Welsh Government, and there was a battle rhythm of meetings in terms of response and planning for EU exit, or Brexit as it was then, and obviously that was de-escalated and stood down. So you know, that's the position, I suppose, in terms of the risk abated. Then we had the pandemic, but obviously it's that watching brief we need to keep an eye on in terms of the material issues that are now coming out of the woodwork. And you know, if risks are escalating in a particular factor, then obviously we'll stand up for a response back to it.
Okay, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I was just going to add, obviously, with the rise in energy prices, we're a big user of energy, of gas and electric in our buildings, and some of our contracts periodically come up for renewal, and anything that's coming up in the next few months to 6 months, we're likely to have huge increases ourselves on our own bills on the schools and buildings. So we need to consider factoring that in as well.
Yeah, you were quite right. I'm sure all the officers have got this uppermost in their minds in every department, as so has millions of domestic users.
Correct, it's going to hurt a lot of people.
Yeah. Right. Are there any other questions from any of the members? No. Any comments from any members? If there are no comments, I think that in regard to the homelessness situation, we need to keep that uppermost in our minds on the Governance and Audit Committee, because of the real financial burden that we may face if the funding that we're getting from the hardship fund from the Welsh Government does not continue. Although that, you know, there'll be a different chair from May next year, I think this should be kept in front of the Governance and Audit Committee with a further report. I would suggest in a few months' time. Yes, Andrew?
I'd welcome that, Chair. I think it's a very prudent way to go forward. I think the difficulty, as you've identified there from a financial perspective, is that the indicators coming out from central government are that there are going to be real term increases of 4% across the board. Whether that translates to us as 4% is another question. The difficulty we've got this year more than any other year, I think, in terms of our revenue grant, is what's included and what's excluded. And I think the more pressure we can bring to say that there's a responsibility within this homelessness policy that's been introduced by Welsh Government for them to pick up the costs for it continued into the future is absolutely where we need to be. The problem it'll give us is if we do get on the face of it what will be a very good settlement in terms of 4% straight away, as we've heard from Suzanne, that halves our amount, because 2 million will be absorbed in homelessness straight away. That's a real threat to our financial stability and really does cause us major issues across the authority. And I think at any turn, if Audit Committee can lobby in terms of our position on homelessness and that hardship grant remaining in the long term until we get some sort of resolution in terms of house building and solving that problem in a more substantial manner, that'll be welcome from all sides, I think, Chair.
Okay. For the other members on the Governance Audit Committee, if you can perhaps indicate with a physical hand that you're all happy with this being kept under review and brought back in the next few months?
Yes, that's a good idea.
Okay. Thank you for that. No other comments. I'll take you back to page 3 of the report of the recommendations, which thankfully been read out by Councillor Barry at the start. I'll take the vote as I've done before. All those who wish to abstain on the recommendations, please show. All those who want to vote against, please show. All those in favour, please show. I think that's everyone, Mair.
Yes, votes carried, Chair.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, members and officers.
I'm sorry, but I may have to go for a few minutes now. I've got a domestic problem.
Yes, you did indicate the pre-meeting.
Yeah.
Councillor Tubby, thank you for that. If
Sorry
you leave,
about that.
we are still quorate as long as no other member leaves us. Okay, right. Take you then to the next item on the agenda, and that's the annual performance report. It's quite an extensive report, pages 19 to 100. And Elias, are you going to take us through this?
I didn't think I was, Chair. Sorry. I thought Councillor Barry was doing it. Sorry.
Oh, right. Okay.
I thought Councillor Mitton was doing it.
We are expecting the leader,
Yeah.
Chair. She's running late.
Just want to pick it up, Bill.
Okay. Apologies. Right. Okay. So make sure this is working. So members that have seen the report in terms of annual performance, if I just talk to a couple of key issues. Sorry, Matthew, are we putting the slides up? Is that what the intention was for the leader or not?
I do have a muralist, yeah.
Right. So we do have a presentation for this bit. Sorry, apologies.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Is that working?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You happy to continue, Ellis?
I'll do my best. I'll do my best. I'll ask Matthew to come in and cover any bits I missed. So
Okay.
obviously members will have seen the report. In terms of our four key objectives, we've deemed one as unsatisfactory, that being the well-being objective, best start, and the other four as adequate. I'm assuming we cover the primary reasons for it being unsatisfactory, but it's around our key challenge at the moment, which is obviously during the pandemic and the changes to the accountability measures, we are really have a deficit on data and evidence. So that obviously members will be aware of that. So if sorry, it says on it would help if I've seen these before, but I haven't, so I do apologize. I'm doing my best here. So we're unable to change the judgment without that evidence. So go on, Mark, go a step forward one. So obviously with the 3 adequate and 1 unsatisfactory, it gives the overall judgment as adequate, which definition of adequate is some strengths where a comparative position is lower median with some rates of improvement and or evidence of some positive impact on change to outcomes. And in particular with regards to unsatisfactory for the best start, important weaknesses outweigh strengths and needs urgent improvement. And obviously members will be aware in terms of our transformation strategy and the RAS strategy, raising aspirations, raising the attainment. Obviously that we've concentrated on the addressing that attainment within the borough for education. Step forward again now, Rose. So in terms of overall indicator position, so 11 of our key performance indicators out of the 35 have improved. And the data, unfortunately, was unavailable for 14 of those 35 indicators due to the fact that they simply haven't been captured for the pandemic position. So overall, we've improved in 52% of the 11 of the 21 available. We've decreased in 9 out of 35 of our indicators. However, there is a narrative to that decrease, which we're going to be coming on to in a moment, I assume, Matthew. So, well, I'll talk to that in a moment. But so the improvement compared to last year, an improvement of 46% of indicators 1920, so compared to that previous year. So as I said, in terms of, go for it. Oh, sorry. Right. Rivs, do you want to talk to this bit, because I'm not quite clear what we've got yeah.
I'm pretty much in the same boat as you, Alice.
Oh,
yeah, where we are with the APR analysis, I think what we've got, these are coming from the self-evaluations, which have gone through the relative scrutiny committee, where the overall judgment has been agreed. So they relate the 3 questions. The question 1 relates to outcomes, question 2 is provision of service delivery, and then question 3 is leadership and management. So there were 9 key performance indicators here for education. They worsened in 3 and enabled for 6, and pretty much that's why this led to the overall judgment that are there. So as you can see, the key performance indicators which relate to the SOAP for best start is percentage of Flying Start children achieving the outcome 1 in all 4 areas. So that has fallen from 52 to 47% between 18 and 19. It's important to note, I think, for education that we look a further year back. I know this report is relating to last year, but we look for education, we're looking at 2019 figures for education rather than 2020. And next year we'll be looking at the 2020 figures because they come out in August time. So what the response there from the learning, we are committed to focusing on prevention, improving how we're working together across the council to support this. And then the other 2 elements then that have decreased are the overall half-day sessions of pupil attendance in primary school and the percentage overall half-day sessions of pupils in secondary school. But again, as Alice has mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, it's difficult in regards to data capture for education at this moment in time due to schools being closed and various other reasons dealing with the pandemic. But yeah, the key part to bring the overall attendance back up is the raising the aspirations and raising standards plans, which is a priority, and education are working with the schools and partners to improve the attendance levels.
Okay, back to next slide, is it, Matthew?
Yeah, go on, Mark.
This one here is relating to working life. So for the regeneration SOAP and elements, the percentage of working population in employment has dropped, as you can see there, from 68.9 to 65.8. Percentage of 16 to 18-year-olds not in education, employment or training has increased slightly, 2.1% to 2.7%. So that means a small number of individuals from Merthyr and we remain focused on addressing this. Number of business deaths, this has increased from 160 in 2019 to 2020 to 165 in 2021. I think the important factor here for business deaths is to only lose 5 more in a pandemic is pretty much incredible. And I think it would have been in regards to the number of grants that we given out, the speed that we gave the grants out last year to help local businesses sustain through the pandemic, is all credit to those officers that were helping with businesses dealing with those grants and facilitating those grants to those businesses to keep them going.
Yeah. Can I just ask you a question there, Matthew, on that, on the percentage of working age population in employment? The reduction from 2018, 19, that's right, from the reduction there of, what is it, 3%. Was that caused entirely by COVID, or were there any other reasons, as far as you know?
As far as I know, I think from the research we've done, is majority is from COVID, majority is from the pandemic. I can ask the officers involved to understand whether there's any other mitigating factors or any other factors which contribute to that.
I think it's important. I think it's important to for us as members to know what all the reasons were, because hopefully, once we come out of this pandemic, we want that figure to go back up to, at the very least, what it was before, and to even higher than that. I'm sure this is the aspiration. Okay, you moving on to the next slide.
There we go. This is environmental services. So the one that's decreased for performance for environmental services, the average number of days taken to clear fly tipping incidents. This has increased from 2.12 to 2.5. I think this one primarily was due to the reallocation of resources. So the staff that were undertaking the fly tipping clearing were moved on to other things. Notwithstanding, yes, it has increased from 2.1 to 2.5. But I think looking at the targets and the figures from other authorities, we're still the best in Wales, if not second best. So although we've reallocated resources into other areas within the service, we're still one of the best in Wales for clearing fly tipping incidents. Good,
that's good to know. Okay, if members got any questions, as I'm doing, if you've got any questions, just indicate.
Let me know, Chair, because I can't see any hands up here.
All right, I can see them, so if somebody, I'll let you know. Carry on.
Chair, I think you just go back. Can you go back, Matthew, a sec, just on the fly tipping clearance? So that was, whilst that was one of the indicators that decreased, that was a conscious decision to reallocate resources. So, you know, that's a particular example where the narrative needs to be explained, really. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
This one, percentage of people who receive special domestic violence support reporting improvement in the quality of life, again, is decreased from 89 to 79%. Now, the element for that, as part of the recovery and improvement, we focus on addressing service quality. We have increased our staff and resource across social services over the last year to support this. Now, this could be, the reduction could be that we didn't have as many people coming through the domestic violence support, or they haven't given us the rationale whether receipt of special domestic violence has improved their quality of life. So it's something that we'll we'll get sort of clarification on as to whether everybody that's gone through that has had the opportunity to identify whether the service has improved their quality of life, which hopefully it should have done.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Next one.
And then we got the case studies within the report. As you say, Chair, it is quite a lengthy report. There's 25 case studies within it that are chosen at random. We put it in. There's a cross variance of case studies within it, but the graph there will identify where those case studies meet our wellbeing objectives. So there's 72 elements within those 25 case studies within it. Environmental well-being only showing 48, maybe because there's some case studies there that won't touch environmental well-being. So if we're looking at the mass test centres in COVID, or dealing with the shielding cohort that we had, the 3,500 residents that were shielding for those 3 months, then those then wouldn't contribute to the well-being objective, maybe for environmental well-being. That's why there's a drop there. But all of the others, through best start to life, through living well and working life, will contribute to the 4 well-being objectives, which we will see through those 25 case studies within the report.
Yeah, I found the case studies very interesting. We did the same last year, didn't we, with this report? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that it, or you got more?
And that's it.
That's it.
That's it there. And interesting to note, Chair, this is, as Andrew mentioned, Andrew Mogford, this is the first year that the APR has come to the Governance and Audit Committee.
Yeah.
Because it is part of I think it's the Local Government Act next year, where the APR will be coming to Governance and Audit Committee. So it just gives the committee a flavour of what's to come. And it's a backward-looking report, so it goes from April 2020 through till March 2021.
Yeah. Thank you, Matthew. Has any member got any questions on the report or the presentation? If not, any comments on the report? I mean, it's, as you say, it's a back-facing document up until March this year. It's a factual document. If there are no comments, can I just clarify something? Because obviously this report has got to be sent to Welsh Government at the end of this month. And this query may well be in your domain, Matthew. If you look at page 41, let me get to it. And it's under the heading Measuring Wellbeing. You got it? Page 41.
Is it page 41 in the report, Chair? Yeah.
Yeah, page 41 on the papers we've had, yeah. And it's under the heading Measuring Wellbeing.
Stay with me.
Okay.
It could be page 15, Chair.
Ah, right.
Matthew.
Oh, right. Sorry, it's 41.
Thank you,
mine. Sorry.
Yes, Chair, I got it.
Yeah. Well, if you look down, it's like the third paragraph down. It said the report looks back over our performance during 2019-2020. Is that correct?
No, Chair, it's last year, up to March 21. So it's
Right.
2021.
Right. So you need to alter that. And I'll have to go back to my this. It's on page. Just about to see it. Page 83 on mine. So I don't know what page that would be. It's a case study, News Lease of Life.
I think it's page 57, Chair.
Right. If Martha could turn to that.
Yep. Got it.
Right. If you look at the second paragraph of that, where it refers to this was well responded to, and we had many name options to choose from. The entries were whittled down to 5 suitable names, and we ran a poll, P-O-L-E. You know, we were raising standards in education in Merthyr Tydfil. We wouldn't want to leave that in there, would we?
I'll make those changes before council on Wednesday.
Okay. If there are, nobody's indicated they've got any questions on it, I'll go back to the front of it, find it myself. Right. The recommendations are on page 20, and it says 2.1, the Governance and Audit Committee note and debate this report. I'll take a vote on it to indicate that we've all approved it otherwise. So those who wish to abstain on that particular report, please show no. Those who wish to vote against, please show. And those who wish to vote for, please show no.
It's carried, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor, very much. And I'll go back to the agenda. And that's item 5, the updated forward work programme, pages 101 to 106. You're going to deal with this, Mark?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll take members through this report. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, this is now you're getting familiar with this standard report coming up at every meeting, which identifies what the committees due to have presented to it over the coming meetings. The key bit for the next meeting is shown in paragraph 4.2 on page 102 of your agenda papers, and it's the it's basically mostly to do with the account, wasn't all to do with the accounts. Audit Wales Audit of Accounts report, final statement of accounts, including the annual governance statement, and obviously the updated forward work programme. If there is anything else to add, we will obviously add them to the agenda. But those are the main items that are coming up for the next meeting, which is on the 18th of October. It's only a couple of weeks away, because this was a special meeting, if you recall, intended for the accounts, but as a result, as it turns out, we did a bit of a swap and put the performance and risk stuff up for this meeting, and the accounts are coming up at the next scheduled meeting. The only other thing I was going to flag up in terms of the forward work programme, the detail then, which is in as Appendix 1 on page, I can't see what it is, oh, I'll read it, 105, I think it is, 105. It just sets out what else is due to come over the course of the municipal year. Just wanted to flag up a couple of things. Matthew touched on it in terms of the Local Government and Elections Act and some of the new responsibilities, which obviously performance was one of those, and scrutinising performance, for example. Another one is looking at complaints and the authority's ability to deal with complaints. Now the performance report does touch on complaints. But I was speaking to Andrew Mogford, it was last week, and the intention will be to bring a report to the committee on complaints and so on. So just to start that ball rolling, really, so members start getting used to that type of information. So that'll be one of the things that will be coming up in more detail. And obviously the discussion around risks as well. What's an agenda item? I think it's due in January, an update on corporate risks. It might well be prudent to have something a bit sooner than that, based on the discussions earlier. But we'll have discussions with Andrew Mogford in the first instance around those matters. Okay, that's all it was, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Before I bring Helen in, Matthew, can you go back to the screen, because the presentation is still on there. Right. Okay, thank you. Helen?
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to say that following the issue of our national report on financial sustainability last week, which you may have seen on our website. We will be bringing that to the next meeting, and also Merthyr's local assessment as well. So I informed Helen this morning, Mark, so you probably haven't got that email yet, sorry.
Right.
So yeah, so a busy meeting for us next time.
I'm going to say we've got the items that there, the accounts, etc., and these will be 2 other items that you'll be bringing, is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and that's on the 18th of October.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, the next item 6 is information report. Item 7 is the reflection and evaluation of the meeting. I think we've dealt with both reports. We've asked pertinent questions. We've had a good discussion on various aspects, including the homelessness problem. And the next item 8, is any other business deemed urgent by the chair. I have none. And can I thank you all for your attendance today's meeting and declare the meeting closed, and hopefully see you all